Hi, welcome to this quick webinar about Servoy, OpenEdge and Telerik. My name is Jan Eleman. I'll be doing the introductions for today and a couple of slides and talking a little bit about the architecture, and Paolo Arone from Servoy will be doing an actual demo. He'll be actually building a couple of applications. So welcome to today's webinar, Paolo.
Thank you, Jan. Hello, everybody.
Paolo, a quick question before we get started. Is my screen visible on your end?
It is, yeah.
Excellent. That is always a good start. All right, well, let's quickly get started. We have a couple of things to talk about. First of all, we'd like to start with a technical overview, then a quick demo of how to use a couple of Telerik components. Then we would like to discuss how to use existing ABL within Servoy, so that means that you don't have to rewrite your Progress business logic. We'll also talk a little bit about other frameworks, because there are also other frameworks besides Telerik Kendo UI. And then Paolo will give a very short demo of some of those frameworks as well. So today we're mainly talking about Kendo UI, one of the UI frameworks developed and sold by a company called Telerik that Progress has purchased. And with Servoy, we make it very easy to use this UI framework to deliver great user experiences to your end users. So a quick architectural overview of how this would work. If you look at the left diagrams, then you can see how this would work in combination with Progress. You have your Progress database, you have your Progress ABL, then Servoy sits in between as the stateful application server, and then you use the Kendo UI as the user interface framework. On the right-hand side, in the diagram, you can see that Servoy can actually do this for other databases, for other business logic, and for other UI frameworks as well. So if you're not only connecting to Progress, but also to other systems, then you can still use Servoy. In fact, you can connect to multiple data sources at the same time and deploy them to multiple UI frameworks. So what Servoy really does for you is it enables you to deliver great user experiences with a 4GL productivity. So there's no need to program in HTML. There's no need to create JavaScript to generate user interfaces, which is sort of a 3GL type of UI programming, but it's all visual. And Servoy takes care of your statefulness, it takes care of your data binding, of the deployment, and of the scalability of the application. So that's a very brief overview of how the technology stack works. And having said that, we're going to jump immediately into a demo so that you can see it, how this works in real life with Paolo, who is going to demonstrate it. So let me switch over to Paolo as the presenter so he can give you an overview. And there we go. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, then feel free to ask them in the questions channel on your right-hand side. We will have time to answer any questions, or maybe you see a piece of code and you don't understand what's happening. We will have time at the end of the session to go into detail and to discuss or answer any specific questions that you have with you. So over to you, Paolo. I see that your screen is already visible. It's looking good.
Great. Okay, so Jan, you have already explained the different separate layers that we have and we use within Servoy, how to connect to UI and either how to connect to the backend. What I'm going to show now is really how that is work. What is one of the layer? That is the UI component used by Telerik, the Kendo UI. This is a separate layer, independent, a set of components which they encapsulate their own property, their own behavior, and their own UI rules that are totally independent from any type of data module. And then we can use the data binding feature to use real data in those UI components. So that's how we have the separation. The only things that we are going to do now, really simple. You can see here the form designer. This is our editor designer where you can create your own screen. Now you see an empty page, like empty screen. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to pick up one of those Kendo elements, for example, a button, and I'm going to place it on the screen. You can see that this element holds some property, like the background color and margin, style class, text, and so on. For example, I can type hello Telerik. I can either use a static property like this, where I have just a text, or I can use, in fact, data binding, like, for example, I can do with this text box. In this text box, I'm going to bind it with one backend data table that is in server. I have here a list of server to which I am connected. I'm going to select one of those for my screen that we call in Servoy forms, and simply I'm going to select one table from the database, and I'm going to do data binding against this table. So once I do that, I can go back in my UI, I can select the text box that I have before, and I can say, okay, on this text box, I want to do data binding with the product name, that is a column that I have in my database. To be more clear, data binding, it means that any change that I have in the database, so in the data, will be pushed into the UI, and vice versa, any change that I might apply from the UI automatically is going to be pushed to the backend without writing any line of code. That's the meaning of data binding. So I can do this for the product name. I can have multiple text, and I can have, for example, a product price. And I can use also more complex UI element. For example, I can pick up one slider. And also this is one Kendo component. It has its own property, max value, minimum value, so we can change it. Max value is going to be 100. And we can use data binding also against this slider. So again, here I can set the price as a binding to this value. I'm going to save. This is already what you see is what you get in our form editor, so you already see some changing being applied here. Also, more complex things, I can show a gauge, which is a chart, and I can again binding against my price. So if now I save and I'm going to run this demo, I will see on the screen the button that I've created with the text I've placed inside, and those fields which before they had just a text placeholder, now they're populated with the text of the column that I have in database. And what you see here, the value 50 is binded to the slider value and also to the guide value. If I try to change the value in the slider, also the gauge will be updated, and also the text box will be updated because of the data binding feature. Same things if I'm going to change it from here to a different value, this will be pushed to database, and I have an update triggered to all my elements. So here you see actually how the different layers interact with each other using Servoy. I can also use more complex objects. Now here you saw the detail coming from the first record in table, but it's possible also to select any other record from the table. So not only the first one, but the last one, the second one, and so on. So I'm going to use another component, a composite Dropbox drop-down item, again from Kendo. And I'm going to make a data binding against our found set. The found set, it's our Servoy object which cache some records coming from database. So it gets the record in chunk from database, and they're available for us already to be used in the UI. And here again, I can select which is the text I want to show, the product name. I can select a property of a subtext like the price again. I can select either an image of my product, and which is going to be my return value. That it's the ID of the product. Now, this is important because not only I want to populate this component, as you see, once I save it, this component can be populated with this data, and I can show you on the screen that is automatically updated here. Yeah. I haven't completed, sorry. And I'm going to populate it as a custom template because it's a composite one. I forgot this check. And I'm going to populate it from the database, but also I want to trigger an event that anytime I select a different item, so it will be a different record from table, I want to trigger a switch of the selected record that I have on my screen. To do this, I'm going to use one on data change event that is available as event callback of my UI component, and I'm going to bind it to one simple method that it's available in scripting in Servoy, really small and really simple. And also I'm going to have a data provider, in this case against one variable that is available in scripting, so this can be used to trigger the switching of the record. So once I save, I go back on my screen, and you can see here this drop-down list is populated with the image of my product, the name of the product, and also the price of it. And if I now try to select a different product, this should trigger a change if I select also the correct variable for it. So however, yeah, my mistake, sorry for that. If I'm going to show now the complete solution for it, which I assume that already at this point you're getting bored of populating those fields and setting with the correct variable. It's just a matter really of setting the correct variables. I'm going to show now the complete solution. Which at the end will look like this, where I have again the same screen, the same table to which I'm connected, some fields. Now I can see more fields like the product name, the price, the description of the product, and other things like that. I have not only one gauge chart, but I have also a second one to see the profit of my total sold of the product. And here is my composite component, where when it's bounded to the correct variable, I can then trigger the switch of the selection record. So if I now try to switch, this will trigger a switch of the selected record, so I can pick up and see a different record from database. Also here there is a QR code that is bounded to this URL, and if you have a mobile available, you can try to connect and go at this page. Will be a nice testing, but this is our first form, and shows how it's simple and how it's quick to make UI and create simple application. And on the next procedure, I'm going to create a different screen where I'm going to show how to make a chart and how to build a chart on top of ABL procedures. What we've seen now, there is a direct connection to database using the JDBC drivers, but in the next short demo, I'm going to use ABL business logic and reuse the business logic of Progress into Servoy. So again, to do that, I'm going to switch to a new form. I'm going to create a new button. Again, a text box. I can make a data binding against, in this case, I'm connected to a Progress sports database. Maybe you're familiar with it. So I can select as data provider a sales representative name. I can use this button to trigger an action and select the next record on database. And I'm going to draw a chart that is another component ready for use, where again I have just to set the correct variable in data binding. Now, the text field is directly populated from database using the JDBC driver, as I said before. Instead, in this component, I want to reuse ABL procedure So I'm going to use a form event, like on record selection is one event that is available in Servoy. Anytime there is one record selected, then I'm going to call a procedure into the ABL, and I will store the result into an object that I call data object, and I'm going to bind now to my chart. So here I will make the binding against my data object. I need a series, which are just some rules to say what I'm going to show to the X axis and to the Y axis. That's just needed for the chart. So that's again another simple object. And that's called series. And a simple text displaying those are going to be the top 10 customers for the selected sales representative. So now I can also select which kind of chart do I want to display. I have a big list of charts available, and all these properties, again, they're encapsulated with the components, so I can just use them out of the box. And once I save, I go back in my demo solution, and here I can see a chart populated by this sales representative. And now if I click on the button next, I will select a different sales representative, and here I'm going to see the top 10 customers from the next sales representative. Also, the chart has its own feature, like removing from the display some specific customers that are available here. And also, if I would like to change the style of my whole solution, since I don't like, for example, the color of this button or so on, I can select a style property for the button itself. So these are style properties that are coming together with Kendo. And this will color the button as red. And depending on which style sheet, which theme I've selected from Telerik, I'm now using the material theme. I can either change the theme to default. So if I now try to run again my application, you will see a different theme for my buttons. Before it was blue, now instead is orange. And that's just style sheet that is being applied, nothing else. So also restyling the whole solution is so simple as selecting a theme from material and applying to the solution as I've done before. That's really simple. So that's conclude my demo here. And I give back the words to you, Jan.
Wow, that was quick but intensive, Paolo. There's a question from Simon de Kra, if it's also possible to use the Kendo UI grid, and the answer is yes. You can use any Kendo UI component within Servoy, and you can also easily bind grids, data sets to them, because Servoy understands natively Progress data sets. So that makes it very easy. We make it very easy to bind either records, rows, fields, data sets, result sets, even multiple. If you have a piece of ABL that has multiple data sets that are being returned, then Servoy knows how to bind that to the user interface. All right. So a quick couple of slides before we go into the second part of Paolo's demo. Let me see if my screen is visible. Let's turn that on. I think it's still on Paolo's screen.
Yeah.
Let's see. All right. Okay. So what I very briefly talked about in my first slide is that while Kendo UI is a great user interface, it has some fantastic components. There are also other great UI frameworks, and I think as a developer today, you have to be able to support multiple different vendors. Kendo UI is great as a great series of components, but it's also based on jQuery, which some developers may consider a little bit older technology. There are other newer frameworks out there. That's the reason why within Servoy we support all of those different UI frameworks. So you have the freedom to choose which UI framework is best for you. And that means that you can also use Bootstrap UI, and this is an example that I am showing here, that you can simply drop into Servoy, and you can bind all those great UI components to Servoy. What I really like about Bootstrap is that there are hundreds of themes available, and as you can see on this screenshot that I made recently, those themes are extremely cheap. So it's, if your price is important to you, they're much more affordable than Kendo UI. And again, we think that you and your end users should make that choice. What is the best UI? What is the best user experience for your customers? And that's why we want to give you the freedom. Use Kendo if you think that is the best, or Bootstrap, or other UI managers. For example, we also have integrated Google Material Design, which is completely free, that you can use. Material Design is based on all the Google applications, such as Google Mail, such as applications used on Android and iOS. And Google makes it very easy to make responsive applications. Now, what's even better about Servoy is you can combine multiple UI frameworks. So you could combine, for example, Kendo UI and Bootstrap within the same application. And that way you can really pick the best UI components for your end users and reuse your existing Progress database and your existing Progress ABL in a 4GL fashion. So that's what Servoy gives to you. Use Kendo UI if you think that is great. We think it's a great UI. Or use other UI frameworks or combine them, and we make it simple so that you don't have to write all that, because of course you can take Kendo today and bind it yourself against your Progress ABL. But it's going to be a tremendous amount of work. I saw a demo recently in which it took pages of code to do all the data binding, to make sure all the events are handled properly, to make sure that you can manage state, because by default it's a stateless front end. Servoy allows you to manage the state of the application and make it very seamless to deliver great user experience to your end users. And if you'd like to discuss your specific application with us, we've done quite some projects with Progress customers. We can really help you to understand what are the best steps for you and your company to make this switch. So feel free to contact us at servoy.com/contact. You can find our phone numbers or email so you can reach out to us. So now let's switch back to Paolo for a quick concluding demo of a responsive design application. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, feel free to continue to post them on the questions channel, because right after Paolo's demo, we'll be here to take any questions that you may have. So having said that, let me switch over back to Paolo. And there you go, Paolo.
Yeah, I have my screen now. Okay, so what you can see now is another solution. This is built with Bootstrap and not with Kendo. And the concept is the same as before. I have a set of components which can use in my form designer, drag and drop into the screen, make data binding, and then run it. And I have this solution here that I have now on the screen. And what is particular of Bootstrap is that it resizes itself depending on the size of the window. So depending if I'm running the solution in a tablet, in a mobile, or in a desktop, I can have different layouts and give the best experience to the user. So for example, here if I have one menu which will be collapsed in a mobile view, instead if I have the full window, then everything here is enlarged and all the components that are showing here together. That's some nice capability for a solution. And again, the aim here is to provide the best user experience to the final user. That's what we would like to achieve. So this is a really short demo where I wanted just to demonstrate this short feature, because I think that at this point it's already clear how simple it is to make data binding and designing screen with Servoy without going in the hell of the HTML or HTML JavaScript.
Well, thanks, Paulo.
Thank
Paulo,
you.
do you mind opening up the Progress application again? Because I think we missed to go a bit into detail on linking to the ABL. So there's a question from Barry, and he said, how do you actually call the ABL in this application? So if you could open up that piece of business logic that connects to...
Yeah, that's possible.
So if you can show that, because I think you demonstrated sort of the top 10 customers, which calls a store procedure in Progress.
Yeah,
and
yeah, that's true. I'm switching workspace for it. I was in a different project before. I'm going back to the same screen. So the concept is here is just to use the API to make a call to the storage procedure, and the storage procedure in one line of code will return me a dataset object. Then from the dataset object, I can do whatever I want. I found for me the most simple way to convert the dataset object into a JSON, because the JSON is more easy to access and to manipulate. So this is what I've done in my demo. And
so are you connecting to our web service, or are you using the JDBC driver, Paolo?
I'm using the ABL driver from Marion.
Yeah, so
they just use the ABL procedure.
Yeah, just so for the audience to make things clear, you can connect to Progress using 3 different ways. You can connect using an existing Progress web service, so Servoy can connect to any RESTful service. You can connect to JSDO objects if you're on a newer version of Progress. That's also still under development. And the third way of connecting is using the driver that Marianne has developed, that we can bring in contact with Marianne for that driver. And with that driver, you can connect directly to ABL. Can you open the database connection to show that? So this is how you would set up a connection in Servoy. You simply put in the driver, and once you have the driver, you point it to the Progress app server. As you can see, I guess we're running it somewhere in the cloud. You point it to the right database, and then Servoy has direct access to both the tables and also to the business logic. So the piece of code that Paulo just showed is where we call the store procedure right there, and then maybe you can also show where we do the data binding on the UI, so that we have that clear as well.
Correct. So before in the data binding, I select a variable called data. That's my data variable that I use within Servoy. That's binded to my chart object. And anyway, this data, I'm just going to populate it with the dataset. Would have been possible even to use the dataset straightforward without doing any further manipulation. But as I said, I had the preference of converting this into a JSON. So I have here a generic method that I can reuse always in the same way for any type of dataset, and converts the dataset into a JSON object. And this is in 2 lines of code. It's available for me, and once it's binded to my component, it just shows up. There is nothing else that I have to do than calling these 2 methods.
Okay, and just
what I'm giving here is basically...
To refresh your memory, Paolo, can you show the end result again? What of this piece of code that you have here?
Sure.
Does that make things clear for you, Barry? Or Barry, let's put it this way: if you have additional questions, then feel free to post them on the questions channel.
Yeah, this is the end result.
Okay, it looks like it's clear to Barry now because he has no additional questions. All right, let me quickly look at the questions channel. If you have any last-minute questions, then make sure to post them right now, because we want to keep this webinar in about half an hour. Or if you have questions after this webinar, then feel free to contact us. We're more than happy to set up a one-on-one demonstration with you, or to analyze with you your application to see how we can help you in the modernization of your Progress application.